Hi everyone, welcome. I'm really excited this afternoon, it's afternoon now, isn't it, to have the most formidable woman, Nikki Hart. How are you, Nikki?
I'm doing well, my love. I am. It's lovely to be invited to speak to your people.
Oh, well, thank you. We've got some fantastic information that I think is really going to educate a lot of people. Our focus today, for everyone who's listening in, is nourish your body, nourish your soul, and nourish your family. Post-separation advice and tips from a nutritional expert, which obviously is Nikki. Let's have a chat, Nikki, about your background. Now, and as I said, you're really formidable. You're highly qualified. You're very passionate about this area, about food. And you're well known in New Zealand and internationally for your expertise in weight management, and you're referred by GPs and specialists to help clients manage their well-being and conditions such as diabetes, cholesterol, high blood pressure, PCOS, which is polycystic ovary syndrome. And you also specialize in hydration, sports nutrition, and you've worked as a consultant for the beverage industry, amongst others. You're a regular on the AM show, and on it goes. Tell us more.
Oh, I think, to be honest, I got into nutrition before it was trendy, if I was going to be honest. It's like everybody's talking about nutrition now. But back in the day, nutrition could only be done at the University of Otago, so that's where I went. And then my passion for nutrition grew as I developed my own practice. And I started working in all sorts of areas, from eating disorders through to medical issues. And it's 30 years of work, I guess. Yeah.
Wow. That's fantastic. Now, a lot of people find it really difficult, don't they, in terms of how do we nourish ourselves? And if we've got children and we're in the middle of a divorce, or we've been through the process and now we're obviously living as a single person and having our children, in terms of care of the children, in terms of whatever that looks like, whether that's a week on, week off, or a 2-3-2 or whatever. And adapting to that, and then trying to ensure that nutritionally it's not fish fingers and chips every night from the freezer department at any of the supermarkets or wherever. So what are some easy and healthy options for a single parent who has to feed themselves and their children?
Yeah, and this is a really important topic. I'm really pleased you've asked me to speak about it, because I think what's happening is nutrition is so polarizing. Everybody has their opinions and views on it, and you only have to, to be honest, before Google came along, I was the font of all knowledge, but now Dr. Google's there with nutrition. It's like everybody has an opinion about nutrition. I think it's really, really important that we embrace government guidelines, and there's every country around the world has a set of guidelines, nutritional guidelines, and we use these because we want to make sure that you're not creating nutritional deficiencies by eliminating food groups for no good reason. So, there are times that you may need to remove a food group, say if you're a celiac, for example, so we need to remove glutinous products, or, those kind of things. There's absolute times when we do. But if you're not getting the broad food groups across a day, you're going to get yourself run down. And then your ability to cope with whatever stresses and emotions you're having to face while you're going through a separation or a divorce is going to be so much harder, because you're not well. And so that's my job, is actually when the first thing somebody does when they come into me and say to me, look, Nick, I'm going through a separation, the first thing I do is go, okay, let's look at your basic nutritional day first, so I can make sure you're not skipping anything.
Are you eating vegetables?
And it is, it's really hard. And, and then you add the cost of living, like when you're going through a separation and stuff, there's all the costs and things as well, right? And so now we've got that, and we have the paradigm where the cost of food in New Zealand is enormous, It's gone up by 18%. And so this is a big deal for many, many, many people who are not only facing the emotion of separation, but now the cost aspect of things as well. And so what happens is you tend to cut corners on not only your own nutrition, but maybe your kids.
And when you're time poor, particularly with looking after children, when you used to be a couple, now you're looking after them individually on your own as a single parent, you tend to grab stuff, that's quick and easy.
Yeah. And if you've been in a traditional relationship where maybe one of the partners was responsible for the children and the food in the house and the other was out working, or perhaps you were two people working, but you used to share cooking, all of a sudden that's gone. And so it's like, what if you don't have good cooking skills? Like, what if you were the partner who never cooked? You know?
Well, that was me. That was me. But you know what I've done? I have my children, because I'm a single parent with kids on my own. My children are great cooks, so they cook.
Yeah, and you know, like food literacy, I call it, is being taught in schools. You know, so we've got a whole generation of children coming through that are probably going to be better than the generation before. You know, because they understand what they need. And there's other things too, like for older children who are involved in a separation or a divorce, what we often see is that if you get into those meal kits, like, you know, the ones that are popular, like HelloFresh or those kind of things, children have to learn to read a recipe. They can then do that themselves, and they, you know, that means everybody's part of the food process, which is nice.
So tell us about some easy options that are healthy.
Okay. So I call it Food Assembly 101. And what I mean by that is, for people who don't have great cooking skills, sometimes they have all the best intentions in the world. They go to the supermarket and buy a plethora of food, and then it goes to waste in their fridge or freezer because they didn't know what to do with it. So there's a difference, I believe, in what we call ultra processing of food and lightly processing of food. So lightly processing of food would be things like the salad bags that are already made up, and that's a lightly processed item. Frozen vegetables that are in those little containers that you just throw into a microwave, they're lightly processed. So those kind of things can often be really useful to have, because then you're going to use it as an assembly item. You're not going to have to cook and grate and do things right from the get-go. And that can save you some time, especially if you're time poor, or you've worked a full day, you've picked up the kids, you've walked in the door, they're hungry, and you're playing beat the clock on how to get everybody fed. So food assembly ideas can be, like those kind of things, can be quite useful.
Yeah, I love it. Even what about the cooked chickens, for example? Are they good to pick up from the supermarket?
Awesome. Nothing wrong with a good cooked chicken. A good cooked chicken. No, but I think the thing with those kind of things is then being able to say, okay, but am I preparing it in a way that is healthy? So if you say, for example, have raised cholesterol and you need to lower the total fat content of your diet, are you removing the skin from the chicken? So there's those kind of things. So, and, you know, let's be honest, crispy skin on a chicken looks really delicious compared to raw skin on a chicken. You're more likely to take that off a raw piece of chicken and cook it, rather than, you know, you might take the skin off that chicken and put it in your mouth. Rather than,
what about putting it in the air fryer, taking the skin off and maybe putting it in the air fryer? Or that?
Yeah, but the skin still contains fat. So it's just being able to say, okay, what's best for me and my health? And so we want you to access fats for things like nuts and seeds and oils, avocados, olives, oily fish, those kind of what we call unsaturated fats, which are better for your heart than a lot of high saturated items like creams and butters and those.
Well, are there any good mayonnaises though? Because you can't have salad without mayonnaise, can you?
Yeah, but again, it doesn't have to be like, say you get a bag of salad that it comes all in, you don't have to add the whole thing. That's, you know, that. So it's not, I really think it's really important, especially for children in this emotional chaos that can occur within a separation, is there should be no villainization of food. And I think that's super important, so we don't get children getting mixed messages. And that can be sometimes tricky if, say, one of the partners is maybe into keto or something and the other one isn't. Are the same food values being represented in both households, that the children then are experiencing the same kind of nutritional messaging? And that's when it gets tricky.
That's a really good point, because what we do with clients who are obviously going through the separation process, when we're working through in terms of the co-parenting, we're talking about having the same rules and boundaries in each household that are aligned for the sake of the children. It's going to escalate the conflict, and that includes food. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. And then it's and looking at, you know, how do we set up pantries and fridges the same, so that children especially can walk in and know that the foods that they like, or, are the biscuits beside the fruit bowl, for example, because it's really easy for children to go, oh, I've got 2 hands, I'll have 2 pieces of baking. Whereas, I'll say, no, I want a piece of baking in one hand, a piece of fruit in the other. It's just trying to find that overall balance, which is super, super important. Don't know what that was. Anyway. Someone's trying to get a hold of me on the computer as well as on my phone. Oh my goodness! See, we're in demand. We're in demand. Yes. So I think it's how do we set a pantry up to be healthy for children and for you, as perhaps when you don't have the children, or perhaps you don't have children in your separation. Is it about then thinking, okay, how do I cook for one? Because cooking for one can be really hard as well.
Yeah, so what's the secrets? Spell them.
Okay, so there's a lot of great products on the market that allow you to see serving sizes for one, and things like those Wattie steamed fresh vegetables, for example, are in individual servings, which is amazing, right? And a lot of these amazing food companies now have great websites and recipes attached, which can be really, really important. So, single servings of things like, those instant rices, they come as a single serving in a pottle. So it means that you're getting the right amount, because it's really easy if you're sad, or say you've come through a really hard day, it's really easy to comfort eat and not eat those healthy things and just go through a drive-through. And if you've got easy to prepare single items at home you can assemble together, that's half the battle.
So that brings me to, are you better to have fresh vegetables or frozen?
That's the universal question. Well, I mean, if you can go outside and in your garden is an apple tree and you can pick the apple off it, fantastic. But you have to kind of think about what's happening to that fruit before it got to you, because by the time the fruit is harvested or the vegetable's harvested and it's fresh, by the time it goes through a distribution centre into the supermarket and then to you at home, it could be 5 days or more in travelling time and stuff. So that's not necessarily as fresh. Whereas frozen produce, when those harvesters are harvesting peas, for example, those peas are snap frozen within seconds of being harvested. So we've locked in the vitamin C at that moment. So it means that they're probably higher in vitamin C than maybe fresh pods that you'd got from the supermarket. So there's a real elitism around nutrition, and we really have to dispel that myth. And I think we need to get smarter at using frozen products. Absolutely.
So this brings me to, which I do often, and I'm sure other people can really relate to this, as I rush off to the supermarket. I've got half an hour. We're all really too busy, rushing woman syndrome, and then you end up buying. You don't have a list of what you need, and then you end up spending twice the price, and you haven't even got what you originally were thinking you were going for.
Yeah, and then you've got the other issue too, where you think you're trying to be healthy, and then you make this thing and then the children refuse it. So there's that as well. So I think, there's a lot of factors in play. And I think the best thing you can do is when it's you're about to have the kids for the week or whatever, the last time you had them, you should put a menu plan or a list together and go, okay, let's see, against those guidelines that I spoke about first, are we ticking all these boxes? Like, how many times a week are we going to have either a red meat or a chicken? And if you're not having that and you're a vegetarian, are you choosing good vegetarian sources like tofu and beans and lentils? Because a lot of people will often say to me, oh, my children have decided to be a vegetarian. And I'm like, it's not as simple as just taking the animal protein off the plate and getting by on a salad. That's not how this works. So it's then understanding that that's a learning process for the child, but also for you when you're trying to get them to menu plan. So I think doing it ahead of time means that from that plan, you can make a shopping list. And from that shopping list, then you're walking into a supermarket, you're not hungry, you know what you're in to buy for, and you're not going to buy incidental items that are probably comfort-based foods like a packet of crisps or some extra ice cream or chocolate or whatever. And the other thing is never shop when you're hungry. That's really bad, because that'll make you just die, eat all sorts of things. So, I think it's really good to have a set day. I try and shop a couple times a week, though, actually. I try and shop on a Sunday so that I've got food ready for the first 2 or 3 days of the week. I think that's really nice to do. And then what I try and do is on a Wednesday, I try and top up things like fruit for the fruit bowl, extra milk, that kind of thing. So I think that's really important so that you've got that kind of thing going on.
Yeah. We will have those links to the government guidelines available after this webinar for everyone to have a look at.
Yeah, so those guidelines, Biddy, were just changed in November 2020. Yeah. So up until then, our guidelines were based on data from 1991 and was based on information we collected in the 80s. So it was terribly out of date.
I think it's terribly off. I think
I've just turned the whole thing off. Everybody's trying to get a hold of me. It's insane. Nobody, I put an out of message on. Good grief. Yeah, you know what it is? It's landlines. It's somebody calling from the and you can't just put I can't answer it because it's a landline. Okay, so leave it alone. So what I found though is that whole guideline thing was quite amazing because we've correlated our research with CSIRO in Australia. And what we've done is created guidelines for every age and gender across a lifespan. And so that's from everybody from the age of 2 right through to over the age of 70, because your nutritional needs change over your lifetime. And so it's understanding what those portions are. So what we'll often see is that, I'll say to parents, be careful that you're not serving up adult-sized portions to a child. And so we're getting children now to use their hands as a tool. So I'll say to them, if you make me a fist, and they look down at their fist, I'm like, imagine that's a potato. And they're like, okay. And I'm like, that's the size. It should be about a quarter or so of your plate of carbohydrate. And that should be at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So not potato at breakfast, of course, but the equivalent of starch or whole grains. And then it's like, okay, so what about meat or chicken? And that should fit into the palm of your hand and be about that thick. If it's fish, it can be your whole hand. So what we're trying to do is get people to not get into the whole obsessive of weighing and measuring things, but actually to use your hands as a pretty good guideline. As a portion measuring mechanism.
Well, in the 70s, we got served up food and then we couldn't leave the table until we'd finished it all.
Yeah. And, what we're trying to do now is, and I advocate this a lot with families, is to put the food in the middle of the table, put it all there and give everybody their plate and ask them to serve themselves. Then, and then what I'll often say for those, those little, I call them my little children terrorists who don't want to negotiate about eating vegetables. I'm like, well, it needs to be at least half your plate. So it's kind of like saying to them, hey, you've been really heavy-handed with that, but you need to make sure you've got half of fruit and veg. And I'll often chop fruit as well as vegetables because I know that they may not have 2 servings of veggies, but they might do a serving of veggies and a serving of fruit. And at least they're still getting a lot of colour, which is what we want in the diet.
Is it okay just to eat as many vegetables as you want?
Well, basically, the guidelines have gone up to at least 5 servings of vegetables a day. And a serving is like, half a potato or a handful of, like 1 big fruit equals 2 little fruit. So it's, so you can see that it's pretty, we really want to make sure you're getting at least 2 fruit and 5 vegetables to get all the color in. Because what we found is that, a lot of people just talk about vitamins and minerals. But what we know now is it's the color of these fruits and vegetables that are highly protective because of what we call polyphenolic compounds or the antioxidants in them. And so they're really protective. So there's a study, for example, that was just done on adolescent males at university who had poor sleep habits and a poor mental health. And they found that by boosting their carotenoid intakes, which is in things that are orange and yellow. So we did it with 2 kiwi fruit a day, 2 of the gold ones. We did 2 gold a day for a study time. And they found that not only did they sleep better, but their mood had improved as well. Wow. So fruit and vegetables are not just for your physical health, but it's for your mental health as well.
So we all love going out, don't we, and eating out, although it's getting very, very expensive. Yeah. Recommendations as a single person if you're, eating out?
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to eat out as a singleton, and sometimes then people don't eat. They don't want to sit in a restaurant or somewhere by themselves. It's more acceptable maybe at a lunchtime to sit by yourself, but they don't want to do it at a dinner time. So this is when we see a lot of people making poorer decisions at nighttime, because rather than sit by themselves somewhere, they will Uber eat, and they might go through drive-thrus or whatever, and they end up eating more than what they actually should be having. So that's a real, like a minefield, I think, for a lot of my single people. And if you're going out and you're trying to make a healthier choice, it's little things. It's kind of like when I say to clients, if you like Italian restaurants, that's good, but a tomato-based pasta is going to be lower in fat than a cream-based one. Or, if you're going to, say, an Asian fusion-based restaurant, be very careful of fried things, So maybe you might want some fried rice, but can you do a stir fry with that, not a creamy curry? So it's those it's just trading things off, because if it becomes that you have to be too clean with your food, you start over restricting, and that can be a problem too. So what we see when people going through the emotional turmoil of separation and divorce, we either see weight loss due to stress and under eating, or we will often see comfort eating and weight gain.
That's
really,
right.
So it's
drugs and alcohol.
Yeah, absolutely. So we see a lot of people drinking an awful lot more, and not eating. And therefore, then that actually then disturbs their micronutrient balance. So they're unwell. So they are more tired. They tend to be more prone to headaches. They're immunosuppressed. So it means that if they're around someone, they're going to be more likely to get colds and flus because their own nutrition isn't good. So there's more to this than just going, it's not about not drinking alcohol, but it's going, what are you doing in relation to your food?
Yeah. So what are some budget-friendly ideas and ways to eat healthy, whether you're
okay? I'm super into baked potatoes. I don't know why potatoes have been the much maligned vegetable, poor potato. But potatoes are a valuable source of vitamin C, which people forget. That's amazing.
Beans?
What? Beans are good.
Okay, otherwise people won't want to sit next to you. Hey.
Yeah, they can be a bit windy. But I'll take if you scrub a potato and fork it, oil it, and put it in an oven, it goes really crispy on the outside, which is great. And the fiber content of that potato will keep you a lot fuller than maybe white rice or white pasta. So I'm not saying that you can't eat these things, but what tends to happen, people default to white carbohydrates instead of thinking, okay, how do I make this food more fiber friendly? Because fiber is good for your bowel, and it's actually really good. It binds cholesterol and removes it out of the body. So there's fiber in the diet is actually really important. And I think there's been this villainization of carbohydrate, and whether that be people avoiding bread or avoiding gluten for no good reason, lots of people are seeking information. They're trying to avoid things. But we have one of the highest rates of bowel cancer in New Zealand, and it's really linked to a low fiber intake, as well as many other things. So as nutritionists and dietitians, we're trying to promote more whole grains, more fruits and vegetables, more nuts. I'm a big fan of a thing called the blue zones, which are the longest living 5 regions around the globe of people who basically are in really good nick and live to a very, very old age, through nutrition and lifestyle behaviors. And so, when you look at their diet, they're at least half their plate is vegetable based. They might, like New Zealand, because we're a farming nation, we've always been, traditional lamb roasts and those kind of things. And we've grown up with that, because we were a farming agricultural nation. But you don't need as much protein as you think you do. You need some, but you need to temper it against.
Is it something like 2 grams of meal or something? Is that right?
Yeah. So we found that a serving of protein is about 65 grams of cooked meat, which is very small. So if you're over a day, you would need more than that, of course. But basically, what we're saying is, protein. It's there to blunt your appetite, so it's great, and it's the amino acid profiles are vital for growth and development in children. So it's important we have these things, but it's important that we don't overemphasize it at the expense of other foods. And I think that's what tends to happen, or that's what I'm seeing a lot of in my office.
That's really interesting. Because as you and I know, and 60% of the population in New Zealand know, whether they're married or de facto. It's one of the most stressful times that you have. It's going through, and it's a life transition that is at the top of the stress continuum. So are there any particular few foods or nutrients that are particularly important that will really assist people in terms of their well-being through the process?
Yeah. So for me, I'm looking at things like, well, I've already spoken about colour, right? But I think we have to be cautious also of using foods or drinks and things to stop us eating those good foods. And a primary example is when people are stressed, they tend to drink a lot more coffee or caffeinated beverages. What we're trying to do is get that amount down to about 400 milligrams of caffeine a day. That's the recommended amount for an adult in New Zealand. And when you think about it, there's about 160 in a flat white. So, it's creeping up there. So when people are drinking multiple coffees over a day, it's a stimulant. It's not, it will raise your blood pressure a wee bit. Yes, it contributes some hydration because it does contain water. So a lot of people think it doesn't, but it does. However, what can often be found is people will have a cup of coffee and not eat. And then they will push out their next meal. And so what tends to happen is then they start missing those nutrients that they need.
Binge. Do they binge eat at the end of the day?
So we see a lot of under eating, and then we see a lot of overeating. And those what we call binge or overeating behaviors usually happens when you're alone. You never go through those kind of binge behaviors when you're in a social setting. So that's what I mean about if you're on your own and say you haven't got the kids that the week that you perhaps it's not your week. It's really easy to be either eating out or Ubering in, drinking too much alcohol, missing food in the morning, all of these things. I don't think you necessarily need a multivitamin or a supplement, but I definitely think that if you're finding it hard reaching all those milestones of 2 fruit every day, making sure one of them is high in vitamin C, making sure you're choosing a whole grain bread versus a white bread, those things. If you're finding it hard to do that, then it might be that when you're under an acute time of stress, like a general all-purpose multi a couple of times a week, just for nutritional insurance, I call it, could just stop you from becoming deficient in something and then setting you up for ill health.
Yeah. So what I've noticed in times of stress, and I'm sure you've seen an increase in this, is that children are ending up at 12, maybe even younger. You're the expert in this in terms of eating disorders, particularly when they've been through a very difficult time in their lives, for example, separation or divorce.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate, but it's true. We're seeing a correlation with separation and divorce and eating disorders. It's not true in all cases, but it's definitely there as a trend. And it's usually because it's never about the food. It's always about control. And when children feel that this situation is beyond their control, they try and find some way to control it. So, and again, this is going to take, if you're noticing that, say, your child is losing a rapid amount of weight quite quickly, or is binge eating and that kind of thing, it's really important that both parties understand the predicament that this child is in and then seek some professional guidance. It's really important to nip it in the bud as soon as you can, because when it becomes a chronic behavior over time, it's harder to rein that back in again. And it requires a psychologist's input, absolutely. But as I said, it's multifactorial, and I find that when I'm dealing with children who are going through this, it's about saying to them, let's have a look at what your fear foods are and let's figure out why you've attributed fear to that food. Like, where has that information for you come from? And so that can be quite empowering for them, because it allows them to have a safe space to talk to somebody like me, where we can unravel it a little bit, which is quite good. And we use a traffic light system, which is quite cool. We do green foods, orange foods, and red foods, and we get them to build a triangle. We get them to write it all out, or to put stickers of the foods and stuff in that. And then I can say, hey, but back in the day, you used to eat this food and now it's in the red zone. So how can we get it out of the red zone into the orange zone so it feels safer? And it's just because, I'll say to them, I don't care if you never eat another French fry in your life, but you need to be able to do those food groups to get the nutrients that you need to be able to cope. And so we talk a lot about that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's some great advice. Thank you. And coming back to divorce and separation, other life transitions, people find it very difficult to manage their emotions. So how can people maintain healthy eating habits when they're at one of the worst times in their lives?
Yeah. I'm actually really intrigued about this, Biddy. There's a what we call now the gut-brain axis. It's a direct telephone line from your gut to your brain. And so when you've got raised cortisol, stress hormones, and all those things that are around you that you're really distressed about, that can often turn off your appetite. It can swing the other way, and you end up eating only processed foods. So there's some amazing links out there, and I think I've put one in. One is called the Food and Mood Centre out of Deakin University in Australia, and they're working on stress and nutrition. And it's incredible the kind of work that they're doing, looking at what colour does in the diet, what about the timing of food. So 9 times out of 10, people think they're hungry when in fact they're thirsty. So sometimes we measure their thirst over a day, and sometimes especially at this time of the year, it's really interesting. We'll often see people will say, oh my goodness, I'm gaining weight over the winter. And I'm like, yeah, but what could actually be happening is the drive to thirst is not as strong. So therefore you're not drinking enough water. And so you end up thinking you're hungry when in fact you're thirsty. And so you're eating instead of drinking.
Well, at the moment, though, it's very humid, isn't it? So I think
it's really strange how people, it's situational too. What we found is that if water's in front of you, like if it's sitting there and it's visual, you are more likely to drink it, right? However, if out of sight, out of mind, what we'll find with people is that, they could be in a meeting and there wasn't a water jug on the table, or they didn't bring a drink bottle with them. So they just continue on with their day, or they'll grab a coffee, or, so they're grabbing stimulants rather than hydration. And so what we find is that if you can make it visual, so for example, just for me, I have a water bottle beside my bed. I have one in the car. I've one on my desk at work. I've got one here in the living room, and I've got one in the kitchen. And it sounds crazy, but when I see it, it makes me go, oh yes, I need a drink. And it really helps. So visualizing it, or keeping it visual, is actually really important. So that helps with stress. The trick is a lot of people though want to wee a lot, so it takes a wee bit of getting used to. Because otherwise,
Are you up in the night weeing all the time then if you've drank 5 litres of water? No.
Well, it's important not to drink 5 litres of water. Do you know you only need a ml of fluid per calorie intake a day? So a lot of people, this whole thing about water bombing yourself is a load of nonsense. You only need to drink as much as keeping your urine pale and plentiful by 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So unless
let's look at the toilet bowl next time.
Well, everybody says they don't look down, but everybody does. Everybody looks down. And so basically it's understanding that there should be plenty of it. It should be quite pale, unless you've had a multivitamin, and then it could be fluorescent. But that just, that's just
then it will be yellow.
It's water soluble vitamins leave via the urine. So that's all your B's and C's. So if you're eating, like, say if you're taking a executive B stress or some liposomal vitamin C, your urine will be quite bright. So just be mindful of that. But just keeping things like that really in your sights.
I find I drink more water when I'm sitting at my desk all the time.
Yeah, because it's right there, right? And and when we're presenting, I must admit, I do a lot of presenting, and when I'm presenting, I always have a lot of water because your mouth gets dry. And so I guess it's people understanding what they need without going down what I call the rabbit hole of the negative stuff that's out there about nutrition. I think somewhere along the line, food has become highly polarizing, and people have got very, very full-on opinions about it. And what we need to know, well, the thing that I observed, for example, in COVID, that very first lockdown that everybody went into and everyone panicked, bought things, I watched what people were buying. Because I saw,
didn't they? A lot did heaps of exercise and lost weight, or a lot got really fat.
Yeah. So, or a lot of people were baking bread and drinking a lot of alcohol. So there was lots of things going on that was really strange. People's behaviours really changed. And it's interesting. I wonder if we now need to take the learnings that we had in COVID and now apply those now going forward and think, okay, how do I look after my sense of well-being? And again, that's like, if fruit and vegetables are expensive, buy frozen. And actually that comes to canned and things as well too, but
What
choose.
about vegetables though? Sodium.
Huh?
Sodium.
Oh, yes. Yes. So you look for the low salt alternatives. If you've got high blood pressure, for example, if you're on that tuna gig of having tuna every day, then don't get it in brine because it's high in sodium. And if you've got high blood pressure, get it in spring water or get it in olive oil because it'll be better for your heart. So it's kind of like, I think what's happened is there's a lot of myths and a lot of misinformation out there. And so you actually have to think, okay, for me, what is best for me? As in, if you know you have raised cholesterol, you need to be mindful that every 12 weeks you need that heart check at your GP, just because you're going through a stressful time. So let's look after you so that you don't drop the ball on your own health and well-being.
Yeah, because it's right, isn't it, that when people are going through stress and anxiety, inevitably most people, it affects their gut health massively, doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah. So we know that stress doesn't cause irritable bowel, but we know that if you're predisposed to irritable bowel, stress will magnify it. It will make it worse. And what we find with IBS or irritable bowel, it's a functional gut disorder. So, but it's really important if your bowel habits change or you're not feeling great, it's really important to go to a GP in the first instance. And why we say that is we want to make sure we're not missing anything in that first degree. And that's when we check for things like celiac disease, bowel cancer, inflammatory bowel diseases. Because if we can eliminate those and go, okay, you are just under a huge amount of stress and you have irritable bowel, what we can do now is a thing called a FODMAP exclusion diet. And you don't have to live on this forever. It's a 2 to 6 week program that we use in conjunction with the stress that you are going through. And then what we do is we eliminate things that could be irritating your gut, and then we settle your gut down. It's like rebooting a computer, basically. If we can get it to calm down, then we reintroduce those foods back because you're not allergic to them. You've just become intolerant. So if we can just calm it down, you can put those foods back in again, and then you're going to cope so much more better than before.
Yeah, that's right. So back to the toilet thing, and we actually should include some images we'll get from Nikki and what your poo should look like. It should be sausages rather than rabbit pellets, shouldn't it?
Yeah, so basically there's a thing called the Bristol stool chart, and it's one that we use to determine where you're at. So what happens with irritable bowel is that you can swing from constipation to diarrhea, or you could be prone to one or the other. And so what we don't want is for you to have any pain. We don't want there to be any nausea, that kind of stuff with going to the bathroom. We don't want there to be straining. We don't want there to be fast evacuation, because it should actually be a normal, what we call peristaltic motion, so that you feel like you've gone completely and that you don't need to then go back to the toilet again. And so, but 9 times out of 10, it's lack of fibre in the New Zealand diet that is one of the main culprits for our bowel issues here. Yeah, well, stress is a biggie too. But what we find is the New Zealand diet really needs a kick in the pants when it comes to fibre. You need 25 to 30 grams of fibre a day. So like 2 slices of, say, Vogel's bread might give you 5 or 6 grams of fibre. So it takes a lot to get 25 to 30 grams of fibre in. So, yeah, important.
Yeah. So, interesting, over the years I've heard some, not my children, thankfully, but, this is not knowing what a cucumber was or a zucchini. So I'm sure you've come across that. And so what are some strategies for introducing kids to new, healthier foods? And I think,
well, you have to start young. That's a big thing. I think what's really interesting, though, is for those families who are doing the meal kits, they're getting kind of exposed to vegetables and things that they wouldn't normally buy if they were just doing their normal diet. So sometimes these meal kits can be quite useful because it's introducing kids to foods and flavors they've not seen before. So that's kind of cool. So, and sometimes we've got, there's a lot of big projects in school called the Garden to Table, where children are being exposed to growing the vegetables and then having to find ways and recipes to make them into food and eat collectively. So sometimes we find that kids who are usually reluctant or resistant to eating some vegetables, if you put them in a social setting with their peers, peer pressure in itself can often be the thing that encourages them to try something new that they wouldn't actually do.
Picky eaters. That was my next.
Yeah. And so, but there's a difference between a picky eater and a child with problem eating. So we know that I've got some lovely children who see me with autism or ADHD, and they're quite, they're very concerned about how their food must look on a plate, or it can't touch each other, and that kind. So we play in that space a lot as well. That's something completely different to our picky eaters. Our picky eaters, it usually happens when they're really young, and it's 9 times out of 10 it's controlled too. Like, it's that terrible 2s to 4s where they want to say no to everything, and so sometimes it's just about exposure. So what we do is, it can often take 10 exposures to the single food before they'll finally go, oh, yeah, all right, I'll give it a go. But, it can be absolutely frustrating as a parent when that child is pushing back on things. So, it's being patient, and that's really hard at the end of the day if you're going through a stressful separation and divorce, trying to be patient. So pick your battles, right?
It might just be that you have to have broccoli and carrots for the next year.
Yeah, and let's not make dinner a battle, because they're going to pick up on that as well, and I'm not saying that, yay, let's have fish and chips every night to keep the kids happy. That's not what I'm saying, but it's being able to go, hey, let's try and take the stress and the animosity and the fear down and away from a dinner table. And I just say to people, put the food in the middle of the table, ask children to help themselves, and say to them, hey, I think you're a wee bit low on colour on your plate, so why don't you pick something else to put on there as well? And it's the way you frame it. And, I'll always say to kids, look, if you have a vegetable, you can have a fruit as well. So that way they win the little battles, but you win the big war, So it's
choose your battles. Yeah. So we are going to include a lot of links and resources after this, but let's talk more about that. So what resources and tools would you recommend for someone who's trying to improve their nutrition during a life transition, such as divorce or separation?
Okay, so the first thing I would do is download the food and nutrition guidelines from the Ministry of Health. They're based on science. We know exactly where all the research was done, and they're validated, so we know that they're safe. So that's important. So I would start there first. Even just looking at it from a portions point of view would do New Zealanders a lot of good. So there's that. The other thing is the Heart Foundation has free resources. They've got amazing little cookbooks that are A5, very simple things, how to make mac cheese a little bit healthier for a family. Because your kids might like mac cheese, so that's cool. I know, it's great, right? But, you can hide cauliflower in mac cheese, and most kids won't see it. And so that's quite sneaky. You can huff that in, so there's lots of things that you can do. So there's some lovely, free, easy to follow cookbooks that are there that I find really, really useful. They've also got the resource on the serving sizes for hands, which I think is really important as well. So there's that. There's the Food and Mood Centre, like I said, from Deakin University, on all the things to do with stress and colour in the diet, which I love. I absolutely love. So that's a favourite. And the other thing is, go and have a look at your favourite products. So I've got some favourite products, and I don't get paid. I'm not a brand ambassador to any of these, so I can put it out there. I love the Sunrise Rice website. I think it's really clear, and I love the recipes on it. And I like that you can do it as like rice salads, or you can do it as vegetarian, and you can mix and match things. I love that. I think that's really cool. I love the Monash University IBS website for people who have IBS and want to actually have very good scientific information about FODMAPs, because it's not as simple as just whipping things out of the diet. You actually need to do it in a certain protocol. So that, I love that website, and I think there's a link to that too. I like all of them. I love at this time of the year, for example. Do you know that people that eat soup at lunchtime, say you've gained weight, say you're feeling a bit worse, and you think, oh, I've really got to do something, but I want to eat healthy. People that eat soup at lunchtime not only eat 28% less calories a day, they get more fiber, more fluid, and more vegetables than someone who doesn't have soup.
Wow. Well, should you make your own, or should you get the ones from the supermarket?
The only things I worry about is the canned and dried varieties because they're too high in salt. But you know those fresh pouches of soup? There's 2 servings in one of those. They're magic. You know, so I might buy, I'm quite into the wellness bowls. They're quite the thing at the moment.
Yeah.
I'm quite into them. They're quite groovy. So I might take one of those little rice bottles, huff it in the microwave, right? Take half a pouch, heat that up, put it together, and throw a handful of spinach at it. Easy.
Nice.
Easy.
Well, it's lunchtime, so everyone can take those ideas and...
Yeah. And the other thing is, like, go and have a look at Dietitians New Zealand, the New Zealand Nutrition Society. There's nutritionists and dietitians in every city and town around New Zealand, and we're here to help. So, you know, and most of us have sites and Instagrams and Facebooks that we put up recipes and that kind of stuff, so you know that the information's safe and valid. So go and have a look at them because they're really good. They really are.
Well, I tell you what, we've managed to chit-chat away for 46 minutes. So you have been fabulous. Some great information. I have learned a lot myself.
There you go.
And I think next time we should actually maybe do some cooking. I'll do the carrots.
And you know, and that's the other thing too, is nutrition and food should bring people together. And I think, you know, if you're going through a really rough time, maybe go out and buy yourself a cookbook for one or whatever, so it inspires you to take care of yourself. Because I think if you do that, you are more likely to cope with the stress that you're under.
Oh, absolutely. And one of our pillars, which is really fundamental, is people's wellness. And it's vitally important with the life transition in terms of divorce and separation. So we want you to be able to move on, have new beginnings, know what to serve up for yourself as a single person, and also for your children. So Nikki, thank you so much for all those tips, and there's going to be all the links that we're going to put up to share with you, and some fantastic advice and education, everyone. And next time, let's get in the kitchen and do some cooking.
I'm in for that.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Have a fabulous rest of the day, and we will be back very soon with some great recipes that we'll cook. Yeah. Bye, everyone.